Alright, hey everybody, this is Derek. I want to talk to you about Aptana Studio 3. In this class we talk about Dreamweaver and we talk about using text editors to create our HTML and CSS. Regardless of what you choose to do, you can use just a text editor, you can use Dreamweaver, but there's something else I want you to look at, and it's called Aptana 3 Studio. One of the reasons I want you to think about this is because even though it might not have all the bells and whistles of Dreamweaver, it's free, it's open source, and you can use it for commercial products. Now, if you want to use Dreamweaver you've got to have a commercial license, you've got to pay for the software, but this is free to use for anything you want. So if you want to be serious about development, but you don't have the money for Dreamweaver, and maybe you don't like Dreamweaver, it doesn't really matter, you can use this as a tool to help you. Now it's new to me too, so I don't know every single thing about it, but from what I have done with it so far, I really like it and it works well. So you can download Aptana Studio and install it on your computer. Make sure when you go through that, just like with anything that you install on your computer, you are looking at making sure that you're just getting Aptana Studio and there's no extra little things in there like some sort of advertisement and different things that might be bundled in with it. So always be careful when you install something. But once you do, you'll get an icon on your desktop that looks like this, Aptana Studio 3. What I want you to understand is that when Aptana Studio is installed, it's going to want to create a workplace. So notice that it's going to say select a workspace. Well, this workspace is on my hard drive in the C drive under my folder system, my hierarchy, and it's called Aptana Studio Workplace. In this folder, I have all my projects, so if you're using it for class, you'd have project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They'll all be separate projects. If I'm working on someone's site, there'll be my site and someone else's site and all of that. Everybody's contained in their own project within this folder. And so that's where I want to go, and that's where this software is going to be looking for your website information. So I'm going to say OK. And so once this loads up, it's going to basically set up a user interface for me to work with. Now it'll probably load up things that I've already started working on. And this stuff here on the left hand side is stuff that's in that folder that I referenced back to. So if I was to go there, and if I was to go into my documents and go to the Aptana Studio workspace, which is what I'm looking at right here. See, here's that Aptana Studio 3 workspace. In that, I have different web things that I've worked on. So these are individual projects that I have created. Now, if I want to say I'm starting fresh, now you'll be starting fresh. You'll have this empty, basically this empty workspace to work in. And so what I want you to think about, this is how I would do this. So if I'm starting fresh, you've got to create, I'm going to close these things. Now, these things wouldn't exist for you. And this has a lot of buttons and things to work with. But you're going to be working in your Project Explorer, and your basically your Project Explorer over here is going to be looking into those things. It's got a lot of different windows that you can open up here, and you can show, like here's my App Explorer, which is right there, my Project Explorer, which is right here, which is there, and I have samples, which is down here. So these are a bunch of different windows and snippets. These are going to come in handy for you in just a little while. But let's say I'm starting brand new and fresh, and this is basically going to show nothing in that folder because there essentially won't be really anything in there. I can right click and say new, and I want to create what's called a new web project. So let's say we're going to start with project 6 or 5 or 4 or whatever it is. I'm going to say web project. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to say default project, and that's fine. And as long as it's directed into that folder, that it knows that folder, I should be able to go click on the next button. And here it is. It's saying that it's going to create this folder it's going to create this project folder within this Aptana Studio 3 workspace. I'm going to call this project, just to give it a 5. Okay. I'm going to say finish. And notice that it created a project 5 here. And it has a way to organize and connect to an FTP if you wanted to do that too. Now, in that project 5 folder, I can start with nothing and create everything from scratch. So for instance, if I was starting from scratch here, I could click on my folder and right click and say new from template, and watch what I can do. And this is one of the nice things about these authoring tools. I can say new HTML, or I could do the HTML4 strict, or I can go down and do an HTML5 template. Now let me show you what happens when you do that. When I click on that, it's going to allow me to create a file, and I'm just going to name this I'm going to call it index HTML5, just so that you can kind of see what it's doing. I'm going to say finish. And it's going to create for me, it's asking me where do I want to put it. So I got to select that folder, and now I'll say finish. Now look what it's done. It already sets up the headers and all of this stuff for me. Now I need to edit it a little bit, but look what it's given me. It's given me my doc type, it's given me my English language, and here's my head from here to here, and I can go in there and I can make sure, here's my meta. Here is my meta name. This is description. We'll look at this when we look at source or SEOs, or search engine optimization. It gives me this. It gives me my title right here, so I can change that title to whatever it is that I want. And then it begins to break down my page. Here's my body. Here's my first division. So this is like my container, which I would want to change to. I would want to make that my ID. Now look what it's doing. Once I type in ID, it's going to give me a pop-up option, and I can double-click on that, and then I can enter my ID. This is going to be container. Oops, I got to spell it right. And now I've got my ID container. I've got my header. I've got my nav, and it throws some stuff in there. I've got this will be the end of my, I got to be careful. You do have to be careful that you understand how your divisions are working. So here's my first division, and here is the end of, there's another division. This one ends right there. So here is the end of my container. And so you do want to make sure that you are watching and you've got to, it doesn't do everything for you, but it does give you a pretty good feel of, here's a new container. This might be, instead of it being a div, we can start to then move into those HTML parts. We already have some HTML5, so here's a footer, and here's my header. Instead of having a div ID header, now it's just header. Here's my, instead of having a div ID nav, now I have nav. And then this could be, instead of a div, this could be a section. So I could call this section, and then this would be the end of the section. And so that's one thing that makes this, using these sort of things, really, really nice. I'm going to hit my save, Control S, and save it. Now if I want to look at this, it's not going to look like much, but I'll throw in, here's in my nav, I've got some content. In my footer, I've got my copyright. And if I want to see what this looks like, I can use this little, make sure I'm on the HTML page, and I can go here and click this little eyeball thing that says Show Preview Editor. And here's my page, here's my H1, here's my nav, and here's my footer. So here's all that information here. If I wanted to see this, and so I have a tab. Now anything that I change, let's say I change this to something else. So if I change this to something and I hit save, I can go back to my preview, and what I want is, oh, this is my title, and so I want to copy this and put this in my H1 as well. Copy, and go down here. That's what I thought I was doing. I wasn't paying attention. Hit save, and then here is my first Aptana page. All right. If I save that, I can see that's what's nice about having that instant kind of instant feedback on what you're doing. Now, one of the things I can do is I can look at this in a browser, so I can go to my browser too. So if I was to go down to that Aptana page and I went into my Project 5, I can go here and open this with the browser of my choice. I like Chrome, so I'd open it with Chrome. And here's my page. So this is kind of why I really like Aptana Studio. It gives you a lot of really nice elements here. So I want to change, I want to make this, here's a link. Let's say I wanted to add an unordered list. So here if I go and I start typing in U, and it knows that I'm going to put in a UL, so I'm going to double click that. It gives me those brackets. I'm going to space them out. I'm going to go and hit LI, and when it realizes what I'm typing, I'm going to hit double click that. Now I have the ability to take this and I can change this, and I've got my lists here. You know, and I can put these things in, hit save, look at my page, and there's my unordered list. And I can then begin doing all of the things that I love about this. So that's one awesome thing. One of the things we've got to do is we've got to go back and we've got to add our CSS. And so, all right. Okay, so if we have these basic divisions already kind of laid out for us, let's add our CSS, let's add our style sheet here. So what I can do is go over to my Project 5, right click again and say New from Template. I'm going to go to CSS, and I'm going to say CSS Template, or I can say Blank File. I can make a blank HTML file too, so I'm going to go here and say Blank File. And I'm going to put it in my Project 5 folder. I'm going to say Finish. No, here it is. It says New File.css. Now, I'm going to change the name of that because I should have put Main CSS. So I'm going to see if I can rename it. That should be Main. I'm going to say Main CSS. So here I've changed that. Okay, so now I have my HTML, but I need to link it to my page here. So down here in my head, I need to begin with my link. All right. Oops, two eyes. So what I need to do is enter in here I get the relative, so I can enter in that information. I'm going to say style sheet. So I say style sheet, so I can click that. The next thing I want to do is the type, and that gives me these prompts, and the type is obviously going to be text /CSS. See, these are things that I can enter in, and then I'm going to say what's my href. As I enter that, it gives me the thing that I need, and then I can put in main.css, because here it even sees it. So let's say that I started to type in main. It sees it there, and it'll finish it for me like so. And then I want to make sure I close that off. Okay. So I always want to test that out, make sure that that's working. Hit save. And if I go here and go to my main CSS, one thing that I don't have is I don't have anything. So I'm going to type in body, and I can double click that, and then I'm going to put in my left bracket, and it gives me 2. So I'm just going to tab down, and I'm going to say background color, and I can see background color, choose that. I'm going to choose the color that I want, which I'm going to make it a gray, and I'm going to enter that in here to save. So if my page is